The music stopped abruptly. Beyonce Knowles Carter, the woman who had commanded stages across the world, stood frozen in the middle of the Tonight Show stage. Her perfectly choreographed confidence had cracked, revealing something raw and human underneath. Jimmy Fallon watched from behind his desk, his smile fading, as he realized this wasn't part of the segment. The audience shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to clap or stay silent. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone sensed they were witnessing something unscripted, something real. It had started as Childhood Song Challenge, a Tonight Show staple where celebrities performed songs from their youth. Beyoncé had agreed enthusiastically, wearing a stunning emerald green dress that caught the studio lights. She was Beyoncé, untouchable, unstoppable, perfect. The challenge had begun playfully. Jimmy spun the wheel, landing on songs from age 8. Beyoncé launched into a childhood favorite with that voice that could stop traffic. The audience was mesmerized. But halfway through the second verse, something shifted. The lyrics she was singing, something about being brave and strong and never giving up, seemed to hit her differently than expected. Her voice, that instrument of power and precision, began to waver, not from a missed note, but from something deeper. I need to stop, she whispered into her microphone, the words barely audible but somehow carrying across the entire studio. She pressed her hand to her chest, struggling to catch her breath. Jimmy was on his feet immediately, walking around his desk with the kind of concerned urgency that had nothing to do with show business and everything to do with human decency. Beyoncé, hey, are you okay? She looked at him with eyes that suddenly seemed much younger, eyes that carried invisible weight. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. Singing that song reminded me of something. The studio was completely silent, not expectant silence, but the reverent silence of people witnessing something sacred. Jimmy reached her at center stage. You don't have to apologize. What's going on? What can I do? Beyoncé took a shaky breath, looking out at the audience, then back at Jimmy. Can I tell you something? Can I tell everyone something? It might not be what people expect from me. You can tell us anything, Jimmy said, his voice gentle but amplified by his wireless microphone so the entire studio could hear. This is a safe space. She nodded, wiping away a tear. That song. I used to sing it when I felt scared or not good enough, and I've been thinking lately. When did I stop needing that reassurance? When did I become the person who's supposed to have all the answers? The cameras captured her expression as she continued, her voice growing stronger but vulnerable. People see success, power, confidence. Most of the time, I am those things. But since becoming a mother, she paused, her voice catching. I feel like I'm failing at the most important job I've ever had. Jimmy's expression softened completely. Gone was any trace of the entertainer. This was just one human being listening to another. What do you mean? I have 3 beautiful children, Beyoncé continued, addressing not just Jimmy now, but the entire audience, speaking to mothers everywhere who might be watching. And every day I wake up terrified that I'm not doing enough for them, that I'm traveling too much, working too much, that I'm not present enough. She laughed bitterly, wiping another tear. Do you know how crazy that sounds? I have everything. Resources, help, opportunities most parents dream of, and I still feel like I'm drowning half the time. Jimmy stepped closer, his voice soft. Can I ask you something? Do your kids know you love them? Of course, she replied immediately. Do they feel safe with you? Yes, but do they laugh with you? Do they come to you when they're hurt or scared? Beyoncé nodded, beginning to see where he was going. Then you're not failing, Jimmy said simply. You're human, and being human doesn't make you a bad mother. It makes you a real one. The audience began to react, not with applause, but with murmurs of recognition, of shared understanding. Women in the audience were wiping their own eyes, recognizing their own struggles in Beyoncé's words. But the pressure, Beyoncé continued, her voice growing stronger, the pressure to be perfect, to have it all figured out. People expect me to be this symbol of strength and empowerment, and I believe in that. But what happens when the symbol needs support? What happens when the strong woman feels weak? Jimmy made a decision that would define this moment. He turned to address the audience directly. How many parents in here have ever felt like they weren't doing enough for their kids? Hands began to rise throughout the studio. Slowly at first, then more confidently. Mothers, fathers, grandparents. Nearly every hand in the audience was raised. How many of you have ever felt like you had to be perfect all the time? Jimmy continued. Again, hands rose across the studio. Jimmy turned back to Beyoncé. See, you're not alone in this. You're not failing. You're just being honest about something most people are too scared to admit. Beyoncé looked out at all those raised hands, at all those faces reflecting her own struggles, and something shifted in her expression. The isolation she'd been carrying seemed to lift slightly. I put my daughter Blue Ivy to bed last night, she said, her voice clearer now, and she asked me why I was always traveling for work, not in an accusatory way, just curious. And I tried to explain about following your dreams and working hard, but all I could think was, am I teaching her to value work over presence? Am I showing her that love means leaving? Jimmy sat down on the edge of the stage, making himself smaller, less intimidating. An invitation for Beyoncé to come down from the performance space and just talk. She accepted the invitation, sitting beside him on the stage edge, her designer dress spread around her like a green waterfall. Your kids aren't going to remember every business trip you took, Jimmy said gently. They're going to remember every time you made them laugh, every time you held them when they cried, every time you showed them that following your dreams doesn't mean abandoning the people you love. Beyoncé was crying openly now, but these weren't tears of despair. These were tears of recognition, of relief. She laughed through her tears. Maybe showing my daughters that even strong women struggle, that even successful people doubt themselves, maybe that's more valuable than pretending I have it all figured out. Jimmy nodded enthusiastically. Yes, that's exactly what they need to see. They need to see that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. And they need to see that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. Beyoncé stood up slowly, smoothing down her dress. Something in her posture had changed. She seemed lighter, more grounded. I want to try something, she said, looking at Jimmy, then at the audience. I want to sing that childhood song again. But this time, I want to sing it not as Beyoncé the performer, but as Bey the mom, for every parent who's ever felt like they weren't enough. Jimmy stood too, moving back to give her space. Are you sure? She nodded, and for the first time that night, her smile was completely unguarded. I'm sure. The Roots, who had been watching this entire exchange with tears in their eyes, began a soft, simple accompaniment. Nothing fancy, nothing produced, just a gentle rhythm to hold space for something real. When Beyoncé began to sing again, her voice was different. Still powerful, still beautiful, but vulnerable in a way that made everyone in that studio lean forward. She sang about being brave, about being strong, about never giving up. But now the words carried new meaning. They weren't just lyrics anymore. They were a mother's prayer, a woman's affirmation, a human being's promise to herself and her children. As the last note faded, the studio erupted in applause. But it wasn't the polite applause of a television audience. It was the sound of recognition, of shared humanity, of mothers and fathers and human beings acknowledging one of their own. Jimmy walked back to Beyoncé, and without a word, they embraced. Not a show business hug, Not a photo opportunity, but a real moment of connection between two people who understood the weight of trying to be everything to everyone. "Thank you," he whispered, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "Thank you for being real." "Thank you," she whispered back, "for making it safe to be real." When they separated, Jimmy addressed the audience one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we've seen something special. We've seen one of the most successful women in the world remind us that success doesn't mean perfection, that strength includes vulnerability, that the best parents aren't the ones who never struggle, they're the ones who struggle with love." 3 months later, Beyoncé released a song called "Lullaby for the Real," written about that night on The Tonight Show. The Tonight Show segment became one of the most shared pieces of content in the show's history. Not because it was entertaining, but because it was true. Jimmy said in later interviews that the night changed how he approached his own role as a father. And Beyoncé? She continued to tour, to record, to inspire millions. But that night on The Tonight Show, she remembered something important. The world might need Beyoncé the icon, but her children just need Bey the mom. And sometimes being human is the most powerful performance of all.